As you've seen, there are lots of little secret corners of the Western Cape where we get our grapes. It means that the eventual wines are different. But it's also in the process that we're very different, and we do a lot of things that aren't necessarily contemplated anymore. We include a lot of ancient winemaking processes, which are very manual, very hands-on. We use different equipment, some of which we've invented ourselves, and some of which we've borrowed from the olden days, and some of which are new. This is Pinot Noir from a spectacular farm in the Overberg called The Drift. These grapes are planted on quite a steep slope, a south-east facing slope. So if you can get the picking right, which is the most important winemaking decision, you're going to have fantastic wine. So that's what we're here to try and determine today. Delicious.
Checking for the ripeness of the pips. When they start going brown and crispy, that's also a sign of reaching maturity. This is 1948 refractometer.
24.
24. Oh.
Spot on.
No, this must come in here. This must come in, I would think.
But I think it all starts with how we pick, and now we're going to go outside and I'll show you how we bring the grapes to Flagstone. Okay, so it all starts with a little bit of yellow plastic, right down to the fact that they're yellow, which means that they don't absorb heat. The cheaper ones are black, but of course they absorb heat. So it's about attention to detail at every level. So normally what would happen is that these are what are used to pick the grapes, and then they're chucked into a big back of a tractor or whatever and taken to the winery. We actually keep it in the plikkiste, and we actually bring the whole plikkis into Flagstone. We don't fill them up. The grapes remain below the handle, so each of these takes, depending on the variety, takes between 12 and 15 kilograms. That means that there's never any pressure on the bottom grapes. So right from the very beginning in the vineyards, which is where we do a lot of the sorting, the growers that we've been working with now for over a decade know the kind of quality that is expected at Flagstone. Bunches don't arrive, grapes don't arrive with leaves or stones or sticks or anything else, and then just pure fruit. Anything like a bird damaged berry, or that most of that is actually cut out in the vineyard, so that the main sorting is actually done by our growers. Okay, so when the little crates arrive at Flagstone, we put them in our cold room here, which is running at -8 degrees. So when I'm about to go to Russia, I come and stand in here for a little while just to get used to it. This is very, very cold, and this cools down the grapes overnight, and we then process them the next day. Another important difference is when the grapes arrive from the different vineyards at Flagstone, we check each batch. Now, the batches that arrive stay separate and as small little individual batches right the way through the process. So although we're not a big winery, the amount of batches that we process are similar to a huge winery. The work is just the same. And when the grapes arrive, they get checked. The temperature of the grapes gets taken to see, because we know what the temperature was in the vineyard in the morning. The grapes get picked very early in the morning. And when they arrive, we check them again just to see how much they've warmed up on the way, so that we can determine a whole lot of things by that. Depending on the temperature of the fruit, obviously, we look at the quality of the fruit in terms of if there's any broken or damaged berries, if there's any rot, anything like that, so that we know when we process them exactly how we need to handle them. And that visual inspection is important. We also take an analysis of the fruit. We determine the sugar, we determine the acidity, we determine the pH, and we look at a couple of other indices to make sure that when we're processing that fruit, we're doing exactly the right thing. Because to be non-interventionist, to use ancient winemaking processes, we believe makes better, happier, more joyful wine. But you've really got to know what you're doing. So you need the analysis and you need the rigor behind that process. I think there's a wonderful saying, which is all winemakers who I believe make joyful wine, they think with the heart of a poet, but they see with the eyes of a scientist. And I think that really encapsulates what we try and do at Flagstone. Obviously at Flagstone we make red and white wine, and they're very different processes. So what we do is when the whites arrive, the white grapes arrive at Flagstone, they get cooled overnight, and then we crush them, which means that we destem the grapes from the stalks. The stalks remain on one side, and we can process the fruit. The big difference between red and white wine is that red wine is fermented with the skins and white wine is fermented without the skins. So we have to separate the skins from the juice. But before that process, the destemming is crucial. With a lot of big mechanized wineries, that process becomes very harsh and very interventionist, and particularly with red grapes, you really are treating them very harshly, and we try to be as soft as possible with the red fruit, which is why we've invented a thing called the laundromat on that side. It's a big perforated drum, the holes in which allow the berries to come through and the stalks remain behind, and it's a very, very soft process. You'll see over here these little spikes that stick out. They basically hold the bunches up so that the bunches tumble over each other, and just that action removes the berries from one bunch by the other. So it's a little bit like hand destemming, and we had a real issue because we made a wine in 2000 where we actually hand destemmed all the berries ourselves, and we made a wine from exactly the same fruit but through a traditional destemmer crusher machine. And the two different eventual wines were so palpably different that we really wanted to try and hand destem everything. And in fact, we did. We had to come up with another machine that could replicate the hand destemming process. And this is what we've come up with. And we've been using it now for the last 6 years, 6 vintages, and it's absolutely brilliant. Still green, definitely not ripe. This is the sort of thing that we're taking out. Quite sour, and you can see the pips still completely unripe. You don't want that tannin in your wine at all. So in South Africa, as you can see, we breed our women pretty strong, and that's so that when we give them a hard time, they can give us what we call a snortklap, which means a little slap across the face to keep the men in order. Okay, so once the white grapes have been destemmed, we pump them through. They go through a chiller again. So although their grapes are already at sort of 3 degrees, we actually chill them right down to close to 0 degrees. Obviously, because they've got sugar, they won't freeze. They go through the mash chiller, and then they get pumped into this press. Now, this is a really cool little toy. This is not our invention. But basically what this press does is that it allows us to press very softly and retain a lot of unoxidized juice. And the way that it does that is that once the bag, which gets inflated with air, compressed air, pushes the skins against the perforated drum and the juice comes out, when it pulls back again, traditionally that would suck air in. And of course, then you get air with your grapes, and your grapes start oxidizing. The juice starts oxidizing. Just the way that an apple oxidizes and goes brown, so does the juice go brown. And as soon as that happens, the chemical reaction means that some of the really ethereal flavors and aromas get lost. So what we want to do, particularly with varieties like Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc, we want to try and retain those ethereal aromas so that when you open the bottle 5 years later, you've still got this freshness and this wonderful bright, sunny character that we get in our white wine. So when the bag pulls back, instead of pulling in air, it actually pulls all the nitrogen down from this bag. And it allows you to basically press anaerobically, or press without the introduction of oxygen, which means that you get a much higher yield or percentage of juice that is still green and unoxidized using this press. So this is it's a very expensive toy, but it really makes all the difference in terms of wines like our Flagstone Free Run Sauvignon Blanc. So just by chilling the grape juice and stopping it from fermenting, we allow all the solids to settle out. They settle right down to the bottom of the tank, and then we do what's called racking, and we actually pump the juice off those solids, and we get a very clean juice as a result, without any mechanization being used, just gravity and temperature. So once we've destemmed the grapes using our laundromat, they are then taken by gravity. So we either pick up the bin with a forklift, or we actually physically bucket those grapes so that they never get pumped. At Flagstone, we believe that we don't put a child through a pump. You shouldn't put a red grape through a pump either. You shouldn't put any grape through a pump, really. They then go straight to our open-top fermenters, where they sit for up to 2 weeks and doing what we call cold soaking. Now, it's very simple that you need the color and you need the tannin from the red grapes in your final wine. But to do it during fermentation, which is the traditional way of doing it, is a little bit more tricky because alcohol is a stripping agent and you end up actually getting very small molecular weight tannins which are characteristically bitter and astringent, and you don't want that. So you want to try and get as much of the color and the tannin out of the red skins before fermentation, and that's why you do a cold soak. To continue the process of taking tannin and color out of the skins, we do manual punch downs, and this allows us to, in a very subtle and soft way, extract all the tannin that is there. So really give wine the longevity that it needs and the structure that it needs, but in a very ancient, soft and loving kind of way. Once we've done that, in between the punch downs and continuously throughout the day and the night, we are checking that ferment to see how fast it's fermenting and how cold and how warm it's fermenting. To see the sugar, there's basically a fermentation curve. So what happens is that as your alcohol increases, so your sugar decreases, and you want them to be very soft, smooth curves. You don't want the yeast to get stressed out. As soon as they get stressed out, they start making funny flavors and aromas, which in some cases you can never get rid of on the wine. You want really the purity of the fruit and the expression of the land from where that fruit came from. And you really don't want the process of winemaking to influence those characteristics. You want to be able to taste the wine and say, wow, this tastes exactly like the vineyard at Wildepaardekloof, or this, I can taste that. We've really got it right this year. So that you can not only reflect the area where that vineyard is, but you can also reflect vintage differentiation. One of our quirky traditions at Flagstone is actually playing bagpipes to the barrels that are maturing and in fact to the tanks. It seems kind of weird, but we have a tradition called the Blessing of the Crush every year, where we get all the cellar team, we get some close friends and family, and we have a little ceremony where we kind of try and ask the gods to look down upon us with a little bit of favor. We try our best to make joyful wine.
The tradition is also important in the winemaking, and then it gives more enjoyment into the wine, and then the people around, the people that are working in the wine, and it's really giving us motivation.
And it's nice because I'm involved from the beginning stages, from the grapes in the farm all the way through to the blends that we make until it's getting bottled. So it's nice tasting through all the ferments right now, and we never know where it might end up.
And also the way we do things, just the punch downs, the labor, it's quite intense, but it's good.
Okay, so what we do every day is taste through all the tanks that are fermenting. So these are samples of all the white tanks and all the red tanks that are fermenting. We do it as early in the morning as possible so that we get a handle on what's going on, and if there are any additions that are required, or if Mia has to go and sing to a tank, play her cello, which has been required in the past, then we can get that out of the way, done before we start crushing.
Ons is 'n baie toegewyde span en ja, ons het dit nodig in die kelder vir al die fisiese werk wat ons doen. Die groot verskil tussen hierdie tipe van opset en van die groter opsette is dat hier word alles met die hand gedoen. En baie aandag aan fyn besonderhede om seker te maak ons maak top kwaliteit wyn. En ek dink baie van my vriende wat saam met my gestudeer het, wat nog steeds by groot koöperatiewe kelders werk, waar ek ook al voorheen gewerk het, dink ek is baie jaloers. Hulle sal graag hier wil ook in so opset werk. En ja, en die kans staan om wonderlike trofees te kan wen deur met wonderlike drywe te werk en 'n wonderlike span mense te hê en al die tegnologie.